If you are an autistic, ADHD, or AuDHD adult, chances are that you've known some mix of burnout, deep fatigue, and seasons where you feel like you're collapsing. I'm Dr. Neff. I'm a clinical psychologist and author of Self-Care for Autistic People and the Autistic Burnout Workbook. After discovering I was autistic, the concept of autistic burnout was one of the first huge eye-openers for me in starting to be able to recontextualize my life and to have a frame that finally made sense of a lot of my life that up to that point had been pretty confusing for me. I'd had a lot of seasons of collapse that often slid into depression. And burnout gave me a new lens for understanding these experiences. It has also helped me to understand the long-term impact of stress on the nervous system and all that I was carrying. So it's probably not that shocking that I ended up writing a book about autistic burnout. And early in that process, when I was reading and writing and doing research, one of the first books that I picked up was Burnout: The Secret to Unlocking the Stress Cycle by Emily and Amelia Nagoski. I absolutely adore this book and I reference it all the time. It does such a good job of unpacking the science of stress in a way that's really digestible and easy to understand. It talks about how our nervous system handles stress and what it means to complete the stress cycle. And it also situates our stress in the modern systems that we're all navigating, while also looking at how we stay human in systems that make that pretty hard. Now, interestingly, both Amelia and Emily discovered they were autistic after writing this book, which honestly makes a whole lot of sense to me. I think it just makes sense that we leave it to the autistic people to deep dive the science of burnout and to develop special interests around this information. Now, in this conversation that Amelia and I had, we talk about burnout in general. We talk about autistic burnout, alexithymia and interoception, how to complete the stress cycle, also how to do it when you can't feel your emotions or your stress signals clearly. And then we also talk about sensory joy, special interests, and even things like how organizing a single drawer or connecting with animals can help us to find a felt sense of safety again. I am so deeply grateful that Amelia chose to spend some of their limited energy and time with me, especially while they're navigating long COVID and their own history of burnout. The conversation really enriched me personally. I found it very generative and energizing for me as a human. So I hope that there is something meaningful that you're able to take away from this conversation as well. I'm really excited to meet you. I'm trying to not overwhelm you with positive emotion. I know for me as an alexithymic, people's positive emotion I don't like, but I am really excited to meet you, to get to have a conversation with you. When I read your book several years ago, and I think I especially related to a lot of the experiences you shared in the book. Partly, I think we have similar sensory profiles around kind of interoception and dulled responses and alexithymia. So
yeah. I wish I had known when we wrote the book what alexithymia was.
So a lot of the questions I have for you are around that, of kind of how you might revisit this topic now that you have this lens of autism, alexithymia, interoception. I guess to start here, maybe my first question. So we've both written books on burnout, which I think is fascinating. You wrote a book with your twin sister, Emily, on burnout before either of you knew you were autistic, correct?
Yeah.
So I got interested in the subject of burnout because I discovered I was autistic. I discovered autistic burnout, and I was like, oh my gosh, my life finally makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Why and how did you get interested in the topic of burnout?
The truth is, we were writing a book about stress, and an editor gave the book the title Burnout, and we were like,
do that.
Okay, sure, whatever.
Interesting.
We
So you were
don't talk
interested
about
in the
burnout
topic of stress
in the book. Yeah. And the idea of burnout was clearly in there because our editor was like, here's the title of this book. And we were like, oh, okay, sure. Yeah, we hadn't thought about burnout necessarily.
Did you have a title in your head when you were writing it?
We thought it would be something artsy fartsy, like unruly women, the science of stress for artists, academics, and activists. And no one liked that. No one like
Yeah,
that.
I bet editors were like, this is too much context.
Yeah. And that's also
Yeah.
too specific. Like, we don't want to
Yeah.
weed people out because they're not in the title, which, is
Mm.
smart. Yeah. So, I mean, that's what a great editor is for, is someone who sees something relatable in the work that you're doing. So we were talking about stress. That was our focus. We didn't actually think about burnout while we were writing it until it had that title, and then we included it in the introduction. So that is
Because
not
it needed
exactly
to
an
make
answer
sense.
to your question, but
Well, no, it's a great example. It was kind of sideways. You were interested in stress, and I also hear, based on the title, you were interested in kind of the gendered experience of stress.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, which makes sense because you probably, as an undiagnosed autistic person, had encountered a bit of stress up to that
Yeah.
point.
It really it it was a book that I needed when I was actually, now that I, in retrospect think about it, was burnt out. I was actually hospitalized twice with stress-induced pain. And I hadn't even realized that I was all that stressed because alexithymia. So it took hospitalization for me to notice how much distress I was in and how badly my body was handling the stress I was under. And I needed to learn how to separate the thing that caused my stress from the experience of stress in my body, because I thought, oh, I'll just push all the way through my doctoral program, and once I'm done, I'll be fine. I'll deal with the thing that's causing my stress, and that will make the stress in my body go away. And happily, I learned that that was wrong before it actually killed me. Although I think it probably came close because, hospitalizations, I was admitted to the hospital for 4 days. Like, that's how sick I was. The thing I needed to know, in addition to separating the thing that causes my stress from the stress of my body, was that it wasn't my fault. That it wasn't because I wasn't smart enough, I wasn't trying hard enough. It was because I was in an unwinnable game. I was,
Yeah.
I mean, for literal context, I was in a doctorate of musical arts program at a state land grant institution where the vast, vast majority of my professors were men. And even the one professor who was a woman was not gracious towards me or generous in any kind of way you would think, like, oh, another woman conductor, here we go. Like, no, I was given no leeway. I was trying to be the thing they wanted me to be, because if I'm not the thing they want me to be, they can end my career. Literally end my career. So I had to kiss some asses and try to conform and try to pretend that it wasn't killing me. And when I learned about the ways that the game around me was rigged against me, it really helped me to kind of disengage my sense of self-worth from the systemic powers. So, like, they can feel how they want, and I'll be faking it as much as I have to, but, like, I know that it's not really me. So this is also complicated by the fact that what was happening to me was sexism.
Yeah.
Duh, because it's classical music, which is, just a white patriarchal construct to begin with, and all my, white male professors expected white maleness of me, complicated by the fact that I am non-binary, and I didn't know that at the time. So it took me a long time to understand that I was viewed by the world as a woman, and therefore what I was experiencing was sexism, because I didn't understand that I was being perceived as a woman. I'm like, I knew intellectually, but I didn't feel it deep in my sense of self. So I needed it explained to me what sexism is and why I'm being treated this way. And so that's why so much of the book is focused on understanding not just the systems that happen in your body, but like an individual's relationship within a large scale system. Does that make sense?
It makes so much sense, and my brain is going in like 5 directions of things I want to pick up on. One is around the gender experience. So I identify as like agender, like the idea of being attached
Me
to
too.
gender just doesn't make a
I
lot of
didn't know
sense.
that was a thing until maybe
Yeah.
3 years ago.
Uh-huh.
I thought being non-binary meant you were somewhere in the middle of the spectrum. And I've always
Yeah.
thought like gender doesn't apply to me. I'm like not on the spectrum. I'm sort of looking at it from outside.
From outside of like, that's an interesting social construct. Yeah. So
But I
you
didn't
just
know
said
that that counted as non-binary.
yes, yes, yeah. So one thing you just said, that something I've thought about, and I often get fumbly with my words when I try to articulate it, is I don't feel attached to gender, but I do feel attached to the experience of being a woman, in the sense of like the social pressures that come with being a mother and the experience of sexism. And that's a weird thing to be like, I'm attached to the experience of the sexism experience, but I'm not attached. Like, I get a little itchy in my skin when people always consistently refer to me to as she, her. I use she, they pronouns, so I'm fine with some of it. But so it is an interesting paradox of when we don't connect to the gender itself, but then we have these sexist experiences we're navigating. Yeah.
I didn't have that experience until I was in grad school and figuring out that it was systems of sexism, misogyny that were influencing me. When I got that, I got like deeply invested in being a woman conductor, of wearing dresses and letting audiences know that people with this kind of presentation can also be powerful, can also be conductors. So I like invested hard in that once I realized that's what was happening to me.
That's so interesting. The social justice I hear. Well, it is exhausting. Like, I'm gonna single-handedly take down the patriarchy, and that's a lot of pressure to put on yourself while navigating that culture. So okay, the other thing you just said that I think is so interesting is also, I feel like what you're describing and what was so powerful about this frame was it was helping you to kind of break down internalized ableism, but you didn't have language for that. You didn't know that that was also in the mix with sexism and patriarchy. And
when I got diagnosed and I looked back at my life and the times I've been fired for jobs for breaking rules that I didn't know were rules, I mean, every time I've been fired from a job, it was because I wasn't doing a thing that I didn't know I was expected to do. That mostly had to do with like maintaining relationships with other staff members, like that I wasn't cooperative, I wasn't communicative.
Yeah. Again, as someone presented as a woman, there's like also that soft, especially in academia, there's actually research on this, that the load of more of that invisible labor is like student mentorship, but it's not actually something that helps you get tenure.
Right. Yeah. It was when I was diagnosed, I was like, this explains so much.
I had the same aha. Okay, I'm going to zoom us out. I'm going to zoom us back to the foundations. This is often what I do as an autistic person. I get deep into the weeds with someone in conversation. Then it's like, okay, wait, foundational knowledge for people who might be listening. And maybe this is the first time hearing about the stress cycle. Can you unpack the stress cycle? Because it's so interesting. I learned this in my psychological training, but it wasn't until I read your book that I was like, this just clicks in my brain in a way that the theories I've read just didn't click. So can you, for someone who's never heard this concept before, can you explain what the stress cycle is and what the difference is between a stress and a stressor? That to me too was the biggest takeaway from your book, was knowing the difference between those two.
That was huge for me too. As Emily explains it, the stress response is a cycle that happens in your body, and it makes the most sense in the environment of evolutionary adaptiveness. Back however many millions years ago, some little proto-creature that was a thing in your distant ancestry went down to the river to get some water and looked across the river and, oh my God, there's a saber-toothed tiger or like whatever scary animal. Oh no. And what happens in that moment is your nervous system perceives danger and it responds with this flood of neurochemicals and electrical signals that change every system in your body to prepare you for fight or flight. Now, these systems include the ones that we notice, like, yeah, your heart races, your breathing gets faster to deliver more oxygen to your muscles, right? But like your skin also changes in ways that are below the level of conscious awareness. Your immune system takes up a lot of energy. So when you have the stress response, part of what happens is your immune system gets the memo, hey, we don't need to worry about malaria right now because here comes saber-toothed tiger. Your reproductive system takes so much energy, but in the stress response, part of the signals that get communicated is, hey, reproductive system, we don't need to worry about babies right now because tiger, teeth. And so all this means that all our energy is reserved to fight or flee. Well, run, leap, jump, climb. And so as we use up everything that stress response prepared our body to do, we burn it all off. We use it all up and we run, leap, jump, climb, and hide like in the cleft of the rock, and we're looking out. And now the saber-toothed tiger is walking away, all satisfied because we're out of its territory. And we have used the stress response cycle to save us from the thing that initiated the stress response. And that returns us to our baseline state of, feeling safe. And that might feel like jubilation, yay, I'm safe. Or it might feel like a real calm peace. Yes, I am safe. It might feel like a connected oneness with everything. Yes, I am safe. Like whatever it feels like to you, it's the complete stress response cycle and your return to baseline. And these days, the things that initiate that same stress response, because our body's capacity to respond to stress has not really evolved past that, right? So the things that initiate that stress response now are not things that can be solved with fight or flight. And what that means is that in order to complete the stress response, we need to deal with the stress in our bodies in a separate process from the process we used to deal with the thing that caused our stress. Like, for example, when I was in doctoral school, I could have tried to push through and deal with the doctoral program that was causing my stress. But if I had tried to do that, probably the stress in my body would have eventually managed to actually destroy my body.
Yeah, we're not meant to be in a stress response for 5 years.
No, we're not meant to be in anything for 5 years. Like we in the book, we describe wellness is not a state of being. It's not a state of mind. It's a state of action. Wellness is the freedom to oscillate through all the cycles of being human, because being stressed is not an enemy. We're designed to experience stress. We have a solution for it. It's being stuck in that state that is the dangerous thing. So in order to have access to an unstressed, safe state, we need to know how to complete the stress response cycle and be aware that just graduating from the degree program or whatever the stressor is not going to tell our bodies that our bodies are safe. We have to speak to our bodies in their own language.
That was, I think, probably my biggest takeaway from your work was this idea. And I think the equation you all came up with was like spend 20 minutes a day completing the stress cycle of like, we can't wait for it to for the stressor to resolve, but it's how do we communicate to our body? We can complete this. We can move this through. We can release it.
I don't think we were, if that's that's a great thing to take away. I don't think we were that prescriptive in our like specific instructions, but if that's
I probably took what you said and I made an autistic rule out of it.
Perfect. That's exactly what you should do. But because there's a lot of people who don't have 20 minutes to spend on that. And the truth is it doesn't necessarily take 20 minutes. And if we actually took the amount of time that would actually take, we would have to spend all day, every day for weeks on end trying to complete leftover stress responses from back in our ancient history,
Well, and then in modern times, this is something I think a lot about with the stress cycle and with completing it. With modern times, we are so inundated. Like I think about even since you've published your book, how much digital noise, there's so much more digital noise. And like we go, if we use social media, we go on it and our nervous system's hijacked from this terrible headline to this terrible headline. And one of my things I get on a little bit of a stump speech on is when people talk about scrolling for relaxation. I'm like, that is not relaxation. That is a workout for your nervous system. But this idea of like, how do we even begin to communicate to our body, like we can address the stress when we're just so inundated in our, especially, we're recording this in 2026. There's a lot going on that's stressful. And then we're constantly interacting with it, many of us, through digital noise.
Yeah. One of the things that Emily and I learned that I think was really important about us writing the book together is that we are, monozygotic twins. We were genetically identical for all intents and purposes. We were raised in the same household, and yet our experience of stress and understanding how stress manifests in our bodies and what stress asks of us in order to deal with it are completely different. So unfortunately, we are a great illustration of why there's no one way to say to people, here's how you know you're stressed and here's how you deal with it. I think the thing that our differences really illustrate is that there are so many ways you could notice it, and there are so many ways that you can address it. Does that answer your question? Is that where you were going with the thought?
I mean, it's interesting, and I don't know that my question was very clear. So, and it does tap into, so I actually just wrote about this, and it's something I've been thinking about, is how do we complete the stress cycle or know we're stressed when we're alexithymic and have interoceptive hypo-responsivity. And I know I heard you and Emily talk where Emily's experience is hypersensitive, right? And you're hyposensitive.
Yes.
So I think you're going down a train of thought that is also very interesting to me, which is that, like, well, what about when we don't know we're having an emotion or we don't know we're stressed until we're sideswiped or hospitalized with it?
Yeah. And Emily thought my experience was extremely unusual until we went on tour with the book, and women would come up to us and say, for example, one completely true story is a woman said, I just got out of the hospital 2 days ago from what my doctor said was stress. Like 2 days ago when she's at our talk, like, what do I do? Please help me. And this was not an isolated incident. So many women we talked to had been hospitalized due to stress, either because they're not allowed to escape into a state of safety, they just don't have access to it, or they had sublimated their own feelings and their own needs and chosen to keep going until they had nothing left. So this is probably more common than people expect. You probably already know and talk about the idea alexithymia is like less than 10% of the population, but it's like 50% of the neurodivergent population. So especially for your audience, this is probably common. And Emily, by the way, has a call out for anybody who has like the opposite of alexithymia. Could you please email us unrulywellness@gmail.com to let us know that, I have that experience where my internal experience is so loud that I cannot ignore it. Emily has not yet heard from anyone.
People do. Okay. Well, I'll go put that in my community, because people in my community have that experience, and I've heard Emily talk about this, and she's absolutely right in that that experience is not usually in the autistic space. We're talking about the hypo experience, but the hyper experience of interoceptive signals is also part of the experience. I would say also, especially when people have crossover with like developmental trauma or complex trauma, that the body can respond by saying, I need to pay attention to every single signal in my body.
Exactly. Yes.
And to know if I'm in danger or not. So that absolutely, I've heard that experience. So Emily's not alone in that.
And I think this comes down to like some sort of really early development in the nervous system. Like Emily and my birth stories are really different. So Emily was born first, like literally in the hallway on the way to the delivery room.
Wow.
Emily was born in the hallway. And I was born 7 minutes later and didn't breathe for 5 minutes. So like my body's first response to existing in the world was to shut down. So something built in from those very first moments of being in the world still today mirror the ways we experience stress. So there's really no telling how any individual will deal with it. I forget how we got started on this. If there was a question I was supposed to answer.
Well, I don't think there was, but I'll
Okay,
shift us to, so I am curious. Okay, 20 minutes a day. Well, my autistic brain likes that too rigid.
great. No, it might
What
not.
are,
No, rigidity
or
can be
too
very good for
prescriptive?
you if it works
Yes.
for you. But I wouldn't tell anybody here's the rule and do it. Like I'd tell somebody come up with your own rule,
Okay.
but
So
do include it in your
do
planning.
include it into, okay. So what is it? And I know that before we started recording, we started talking about long COVID. So I know your
Yeah,
context probably looks pretty different, but I'm curious,
yeah.
like, how are you completing your stress cycle in 2026 with all the things? Like, what does that look like for you right now?
Always, more than Emily, my ways of completing the stress response cycle have been more intellectual, more in my mind. So mindfulness meditation is very helpful for me. The fact that I don't interact with a lot of people in real life anymore has reduced my experience of stress by a lot.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that have since I was diagnosed with autism, and my diagnostician said that I had the highest masking score she had ever seen. And since then, I have been learning to unmask. That has also reduced my experience of stress. So,
Mm-hmm.
imagination and
Mm-hmm.
creative self expression, things I can do in a chair or in bed, these things, and also I have the time and resources to prioritize sleep. These are the ways that I manage my stress now. Although
Mm-hmm.
in April of 2020, that late, I was managing my stress like I was completing stress response cycles on horseback. I was taking horseback lessons once or twice a week, and like I get to, groom the animal and saddle it and then ride it, and like it's this like physical mindfulness and awareness and connection with an animal, and it like that was this like all-encompassing multimodality stress cycle completion thing that felt so great. And I don't have access to that physically anymore, but
Oh,
happily I
yeah.
can still write silly songs, and I can still do mindfulness
Mm-hmm.
meditation, and I can still read books that make my body feel like it has conquered the dragon and
Mm-hmm.
saved the princess, so that I still have the bodily experience that comes from my imagination rather than actually making my body do the things.
Mm-hmm. When you talk about the horse, like my mind goes to how first of all, I just instantly felt soothed just hearing you talk about it, but how multisensory that is, and how I
Yes.
think probably for a lot of us, engaging in soothing multisensory experiences to
Yes.
release the stress is probably so important, because a lot of us accumulate a lot of sensory stress.
Yeah, cooking is a
Yeah.
multisensory process
Mm-hmm.
of self-expression and creation that a lot of people find soothing, especially baking, because something that smells really good and feels really good. Knitting, because you get to like touch the fabric and the yarn and have,
Mm-hmm.
stacks of soft things in your craft room. And there's in the book we talk about the magic trick, which is the combination of moving your body in time with others with a shared purpose. That combination is so effective, and that includes like going on protest marches, dancing,
Mm-hmm.
worshiping, singing, playing in a band, playing sports, even just watching sports or an event with a like-minded enthusiastic crowd where there's like cheering and standing and
Mm-hmm.
chanting. Any of those things are gonna get you through the stress response cycle and remind your body that it's safe and that it
Mm-hmm.
belongs. Because I with autism don't like big crowds. I feel very vigilant when I'm in a crowd. For me, the horseback riding, because it's just you and this animal, and
Mm-hmm.
that was
Mm-hmm.
right for me.
Well, and I love the way you've adapted that, because that's something from like collectivistic cultures, indigenous wisdom that we've really lost in our kind of Western white individualistic society, which is like nervous systems connect and they regulate together through drumming and rhythm and chanting. And, but for an autistic person, right, that might not be accessible to go to, a crowd or a worship service or
Yeah.
anything that's collective. So the way you're talking about connecting with another creature, a horse, that's such a beautiful way of, you're still getting that co-regulation that comes with connecting with another nervous system. And horses, I mean, there's a reason horse therapy is a thing because of the way they attune to the human nervous system.
Yeah.
That's such a beautiful way to adapt that collective wisdom. Yeah, I
Yeah,
love that.
I know literal horseback riding isn't super accessible for a lot of people. I lived in the country for, I lived a 20-minute drive from just farms. So like I had access to it and financially was able to afford to kind of have this hobby. But like connection to any pets, especially mammals, especially cuddly mammals who want to be warm and soft in your lap. It's very effective, the same thing. And it doesn't even have to be connection to a literal creature, a sense of connectedness to nature, to the ocean, to a loving divine presence, to your own inner child. Any sense that there's a presence that makes you feel seen and safe and understood, that's going to be effective.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I really like positive psychology, which is kind of the study of, so much of psychology has looked at the study of things that make us unwell, and positive psychology is like what helps us flourish. And what you're describing, I'm thinking of awe, I'm thinking of transcendence.
Yes.
There's a concept of quiet ego, which is like we often get pulled into this Goldilocks idea of the ego of like we want to have enough self-esteem, but not too much. We don't have enough low self-esteem. But the quiet ego is like when we're like immersed and connected to something bigger than ourselves, and and being able to be connected to that. And I also think that's a lot of what mindfulness kind of helps us get to too, is a lot of these experiences of transcendence and awe and beauty.
Absolutely.
Which I talk about sensory pleasure a lot. And so this also connects to that, which is then connected to unmasking. Like all of these things start to connect, I think, in the autistic experience around, unmasking. So much is like starting to become aware of our pleasure, become aware of what brings us joy. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to ask you one of my hardball questions.
Okay.
And it's okay if you're like, I feel free to pass on this. So one of the questions I get when I'm introducing this concept of kind of fight flight or the window of tolerance or completing the stress cycle is, for neurodivergent folks or for racialized people or people with complex trauma who are navigating a world where kind of their nervous systems are often on and they're like their nervous system's already running at a higher baseline. So they'll often say to me, well, I don't know like what the window of tolerance feels like, or in the stress cycle, like I don't know what returning to normal or feeling safe, I don't know what that feels like because I don't experience that. So I guess the question being like, is this concept still applicable to folks like that? Or how do you adapt it when you're talking with folks where it's like, well, I don't ever return to a baseline. I'm always hyper vigilant. I'm always stressed.
Yeah, it absolutely applies to everybody because everybody has an autonomic nervous system. So everybody has access to all of the states. It may be that you've reached a point in your life where you never feel free to access the safe states, but there has been some time in your life when you were chill, when you felt like I can just do and be whatever comes naturally. And if you can find that memory of that experience and try to recall what it was that you were doing that made you feel like that. For a lot of kids I knew, surprise, it was playing in band, singing in the choir, being in the play. For some people, it's working alone on a painting in a studio. For some people, it's when you're running down the beach. But there's probably been a moment, an activity, a something that once in your life you remember, I have felt that once. And if you can remember that and try that activity again and see if it helps even just a little, then you have found a way in. You've opened a door to a room where there are a lot more doors that you can continue to explore of what comes next and how do I get even deeper into this sense of feeling safe. Does that make sense?
It does. And what I love about that is it's like, find your foothold.
Yes.
And if you can find even a sliver of a memory, that's your foothold in and then maybe you can revisit it and over time. And so the window of tolerance idea, which comes from Daniel Siegel, it kind of overlays on top of some of the stress cycle idea. And it's often talked about as like when we're in our window of tolerance, it's often talked about as like very, or in polyvagal theory, which is critiqued, but it's often talked about as social. Like it's when you're in your social, it's when you're open, which again is not going to connect for a lot of autistic people. So the examples you gave I really like, because it might be when you're immersed in an interest, when you're in sensory joy. But I think for me when I'm like, okay,
organize a drawer and all of the things have places and I know exactly what I have and where to find them, that feels so safe. Mm-hmm. And that's not a thing I ever credited as, helping me return to my baseline until after I was diagnosed with autism. And I was like, oh, that's why that happens.
I love that. When my drawer is organized, that's how I get back to my safe.
It feels so good.
And not in an OCD way, but in an autistic way.
Yeah, no, I do not have OCD, not even close. But no, it's not like things have to be perfect. Otherwise, I will feel terrible. And if it's not perfect, I have to fix it. It's just like, things get messy. And it's like a literal return to baseline. If I can literally just return this one little drawer, if I can return that to the state where I understand it, it tells my body that it has access to safety because look at this evidence of I have made this understandable and safe.
And that's exactly how, like when I teach about OCD and autism a bit, and exactly how I encourage clinicians to differentiate, because I think a lot of autistic people get misdiagnosed with OCD or they have both and the autism's missed, but it's exactly that. It's not, I have to do this, which would be more of our threat response or something bad will happen.
Right.
It is so soothing when there's visual order, when things are in their place, which makes me think also about how much kind of our environment and the environments we build communicate to our nervous systems and can either communicate safety or communicate threat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I grew up in a household where we lived below the poverty line. We got free lunch at school. We were literally poor, like the working poor, like they talk about on the news. So for me, organizing my wardrobe, folding my laundry and putting it away in a space where I can see what I have and understand that I have enough and that it's here for me, that is a deep sense of safety for me, because it's a thing I didn't have when I was a kid. Do I have enough? Am I going to have access to what I need when need arises? Like back when I was a kid, the answer was no. But now that I'm an adult and I can answer that question, yes, like any experience that fills that need returns my body to awareness that it does not have to be vigilant all the time because I have access to safety right here.
I love that you have added the element of like, and visually being able to see it. How your nervous system like still benefits from having that cue. Like I can visually see I'm okay. My needs are going to be met.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I don't want all my clothes like where I can see them. I got an app where I can you take a picture of everything you own. This sounds a little bit crazy. You take a picture of everything you own and you enter the size and what it's made of and what color it is. And then you can organize it in an app and you can see it all on a screen. I love it so much. It sounds over the top, but some of autism just is a little over the top.
I mean, yeah, some of autism is over the top, especially when it comes to the cataloging and I love, it's so soothing for me when I make a system and then when I add, for me, it's also about adding to the collection. Oh yes. And then I'll
adding just the right thing that fills the vacancy perfectly.
Mm-hmm. So soothing. Yeah. That would be a whole interesting conversation, which maybe for another time, but the autistic joys that help complete the stress cycle. So adding to a collection, time with special interest, sensory soothing. There's, obviously the diagnostic criteria, it's all the things that are hard about autism, but there's also all these things that we have access to that are helpful in the sense of completing the stress cycle.
Oh yeah. Yeah. When I was in therapy, I went back into therapy. I finished my doctorate in 2013. I went back into therapy in 2020. Nope, in 2016. Because there was an election and it was bad for me. And when I started talking about, the last time I was in therapy was when I was in my doctoral program. And here's, this is what it was like. And she was like, yeah, that sounds terrible. You could have just quit. And I was like, no, I couldn't. It never occurred to me once to quit. It was never a temptation because autistic people don't give up. They are more persistent than typical. And I was astonished by the notion that I would have quit a thing, which is a tremendous strength because I finished it and I got to the thing I wanted, but it also was so dangerous for me to stick to a thing that was clearly not good for my wellness overall. Strengths, it's superpowers that are draining.
Yeah. And I think that is such a big part of it too, is like knowing, like for autistic people in burnout or just in wellness in general, like knowing when it's okay to step away, knowing like that becomes such a huge part of the learning arc.
Yeah. And getting the sense that if you do step away, that's still safe. That's still comfortable. That feels, to this day, I've been in therapy continually since 2016. I've been back in therapy. And including after I got diagnosed with autism, I got a new therapist who was more informed about treating autistic clients. To this day, I still don't quite believe that quitting things is safe.
Yes. Again, this is another way I really relate to you. Of so about a year ago, I was at the lowest of my chronic fatigue, long COVID. And I was so annoyed when I learned I'm going to have to address my workaholism and my type A personality to like get a foothold on this. And I was like, can't I just do more relaxation exercises? Why do I have to address this like personality structure that I have?
Can't I do more to fix this overwhelming fatigue? Can't I work harder in order to overcome this illness?
Are you telling me that's not the trick?
It's not the trick. I also had to learn that. Yeah. But again, it took a kick in the pants for me to notice. Well, I had to be too ill to do my job and had to leave the career I had dreamed of all my life.
I had to be at a place of like I was I could maybe work 1 or 2 hours a day, but I was like horizontal all day. Yep. And it took, I think for personalities like us, it probably takes like the body absolutely forcing you to find another way before we'll do it.
Yeah. Unless you're gifted with, hyper awareness of your internal state, then your body tells you in advance, hey, don't do that. But the rest of us have to get kicked in the pants in order to learn it.
Yep. Well, I want to honor your time. So I'm going to wrap with this question of knowing all that you know now, like, and thinking back to your book on stress. Is there anything else about the autistic experience that sorry, that's maybe a huge question that I'm like, we'll end with this one question. But if there's any itchy thoughts of things like, oh yeah, I would have thought about this differently, or I would have worded this different now that I'm looking at it from an autistic lens.
No. Yes, of course there are differences, but looking back at so when I was diagnosed, I made a YouTube channel called Autistic Burnout about the ways that the book parallels, overlaps, and contradicts with autistic burnout as a specific experience. And for the most part, two autistic people were writing it. So of course it's going to end up sounding like it's going to address autistic burnout just by accident. And we did include things in the book that did not ring true to us because they were evidence-based. So we included the stuff that was like, well, that doesn't seem right, but the evidence says so we're going to put it in there. But the processes are all the same because we all have nervous systems. It's just a matter of degree. And a thing that I like to emphasize every time I talk about the fact that, I talk about autistic burnout or burnout that is gendered, that these differences are just two, for example, of many, many ways to be different, because your race, your education, your class, the first language you speak, the religion you are, all of these differences separate us potentially from the like very narrow socially constructed ideal, to the extent that if you are not, rich, white, cis, English speaking, Christian and masculine, and thin and able-bodied and neurotypical, if you're not all of those things all at the same time, you are standing at an intersection of a bunch of different oppressions, but also probably at your intersection are some roads of power.
Yeah.
And it's important to know that, like, whatever your differences are, you're going to find a way through the stress you experience due to those oppressions in whatever way works best for you. But the processes of your nervous system, that's all fundamentally the same. It's only going to vary intensities in whatever direction that is specific to your existence.
I love that response. I often get the question, is autistic burnout the same as burnout? And my answer is always yes and no.
Exactly.
Of like, yes, it's the same, because all burnout is burnout of the nervous system. And I love what you're bringing in and all burnout is intersectional. Like, it's all the context of our intersecting identities and the systems we're navigating. And the reason I say it's different is I think socially what people mean when they say I'm in autistic burnout, they're often describing a level of functioning very different than how like mainstream uses the concept of burnout. But the idea of it, all burnout of the nervous system. And then our identities, our contexts are all going to influence that. So yeah. Well, any what I call itchy thoughts before we wrap? Itchy thoughts are when I'm in a conversation or an interview and I have a thought that I'm like, oh, I want to say this thing. Do you have any itchy thoughts before we wrap up?
Love it. The fact that we both have long COVID. My sister also has long COVID. I learned when I was diagnosed with autism. I learned that I am autistic after I was diagnosed with long COVID. And I learned there that autistic people are more likely to get long COVID because our nervous systems are more intensely activated. Which also, leads us to the much more common mast cell activation syndrome specifically. So that's a thing I didn't know that, yay, you're talking about. So yay. And the other thing is the thing I always want to make clear whenever I talk about burnout, that the cure for burnout is not self-care. Us doing things for ourselves will never be enough, because standing against the tide of the onslaught of what society tells us who and what we ought to be, we're going to get knocked down. We're just not strong enough to withstand it. So the cure for burnout has to be all of us caring for each other, because when we stand together in the rushing river, we can hold each other up.
I love that. Collective care, interconnected care. Yes. I wrote a book called Self-Care for Autistic People because the publishers were like, hey, do you want to write this book? And I was like,
yeah.
I have a lot of critiques about the self-care concept, but yes. Yeah. But so when I talk about self-care, it's the same of like, we have to move beyond this concept of self-care to interconnected care, to collective care.
Yes.
And we can't self-care our way out of burnout. That's such a powerful way to end. Yeah.
You do also have to start with giving yourself the care of recognizing that you deserve resources, that you deserve to spend the time to recover. And then the next step is to go get help. Make that possible.
Well, and that, especially when people are coming out of masking, which is like, with masking, we're deprioritizing our needs to prioritize the needs around us. So a little bit of that self-care message is actually really good for us, of like, and maybe attune to what you need. That's okay too. It's hopefully all for the kind of serving the ultimate purpose of then being able to kind of get back into a space of interconnected and collective care. Yeah,
especially for autistic people, we learn that other people are dangerous because they literally our whole experience of the world is that trying to connect other people results in rejection and in misunderstanding. We have learned that not because, we're shy or whatever, but because our experience of the world has literally taught us that. So the idea of accessing care from other people can feel very dangerous. And so the first step has to be, recognizing in yourself what you need and deciding that you're worthy. Oh, by the way, you're worthy. I just want to make clear, if in case anybody hasn't told you lately, you're worthy of care just as you are. You don't have to unmask. You don't have to mask. You can just be who you are as you are now. And you're worthy of care.
I love that. And I couldn't have, there's not a better way to end this. So I'm not going to ruin that ending with it. Yes. If you're listening, you are worthy of care. That is a great way to end our conversation. Amelia, thank you so much. I appreciate how much energy and time is a precious resource. So thank you so much for spending your precious resources with us, talking about burnout and autism and all of the things. So thank you.
It's absolutely my pleasure. Thank you.